Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to just give a few more minutes for folks to come in, but while you're waiting, if you could drop in the chat your name, your title, and a benefit that you've seen that's very unique being offered in your line of work. Hi, Patsy. Great. Thank you so much for being here today. Oh, that's a cool one, a meditation app subscription. Great. Well, while you are dropping your intros into the chat, I'm going to introduce myself and our hosts. My name is Joanna, pronoun she, hers, and I'm on the marketing team here at Edgility. I'll be your webinar support today. And just to kick us off with a little technical information, there will be time for participation throughout the webinar. Feel free to add your questions to the chat and we'll do our best to get to all of them by the end of the session. Other times during the webinar, you'll be asked to participate in polls. We'll select the, please select the option on the screen that fits best for you. We'll be recording this and send all of you an email later with this recording and some follow-up information. I am now going to hand things over to our hosts, Allison Wyatt, co-founder and managing partner here at Edgility, and Katrina Magdal, co-founder of Listen to Your Mothers.
Thank you, Joanna. Welcome, everyone. Happy to just introduce myself briefly, and then Katrina, I can hand it over to you. So my name is Allison Wyatt. I'm one of the co-founding managing partners of Edgility, and I head up our human capital consulting practice. I've spent about 20 years doing talent strategy work in both the nonprofit and for-profit spaces. And that included serving in an executive level human assets leadership role for nearly a decade at a national nonprofit. And so really during that time have specialized in total rewards, performance management, talent development, as well as leading large-scale recruitment efforts throughout that entire time. And I formed Edgility with my partner because I really saw so many organizations struggling to live out their values for their own people internally with their talent programs. And, you know, maybe they were a youth development organization that struggled to develop their own staff. And so that's really the lens that I bring to this work, is helping organizations align their values with aspects of their talent programs for their own people internally.
Hi, I'm Katrina Magdal. My pronouns are she, hers. Thank you for having me. I'm one co-founder of Listen to Your Mothers. I'll go in later into what Listen to Your Mothers, who we are, what we do. But I'm excited to be here with Edgility. My past experience is somewhat similar to Allison's, and a lot of the values that we have in our work at Listen to Your Mothers are really well aligned with Edgility. I'll just say, you know, briefly, you can read about my background, but I'll just say briefly, I came into the work of people and culture through a passion for educational equity, and then it's actually transformed into this. I still have that passion for advancing educational equity, but to also creating more equitable workplaces. And right now my focus is on creating more equitable, inclusive, and supportive workplaces for moms, and by doing so, everyone who works there. So in my evolving experience, I kind of found this niche area of expertise in people operations, specifically policies and benefits, and specifically in nonprofits. I've designed, written, implemented, like put into practice probably hundreds, if not 1,000 at this point, for organizations as small as 12 employees located in one geographic area to orgs that are nearing 400 employees throughout the US. So excited to be here.
Great. Well, let me tell you a little bit about who we are, and starting with Edgility. Our organization really believes that with the right leaders and the right talent systems, equity can be achieved internally in an organization, and even better for the missions that those organizations seek to fulfill. And so, our thinking is that if we place equity-minded leaders and build really equity-centered talent systems, then ultimately we can close wage gaps, we can close opportunity gaps, and we can really build a leadership bench that is reflective of the communities we're serving in this sector. So that's our why at Edgility. And we essentially have 3 ways that we do this. We have an executive search practice that helps organizations to recruit leaders at the executive level, director level, VP level, and really centering equitable search practices and building diverse pipelines of talent. And so in our search practice, over 50% of the leaders that we place identify as women, and over 70% of the leaders we place are leaders of color as a result of that emphasis. Our consulting practice has 2 branches of work. We have a large compensation practice that really looks at designing compensation programs that are externally competitive, financially sustainable, but also internally equitable. We do wage gap analyses, and we help organizations implement and roll those programs out. In addition to that, we think even more broadly about talent systems, because compensation intersects with so many things that in your talent ecosphere. So we help with overarching talent philosophies, designing and redesigning performance management systems to link up with the comp programs, as well as helping to ensure you have a really strong evaluation process for the leader in your organization, which honestly is sometimes a step that gets overlooked. So those are some of the things we really focus on supporting our clients around. We work very broadly across the entire nonprofit space. A lot of work in the education community and youth space, as well as healthcare. And then, we work with philanthropic institutions, and just really across the breadth of the nonprofit space. And this just gives you a snapshot of some of the organizations that we've supported over the years. So now I'll turn it over to Katrina to share more about Listen to Your Mothers.
Awesome, thanks. So we came together, and I'll speak a little bit more about that, last year, and first thing we did was create mission and vision and values, which you don't see here. But and our mission is really to continuously draw on the insights of working moms, to then bring that information, as well as our own subject matter expertise, to collaborate with organizations and businesses that want to shift their culture, change their practices and policies to retain and grow talent. I see and read these like stats and narratives every day, but just to kind of give some context to this. So globally, the US lags way behind competition in terms of retaining working moms in the workplace, and this actually costs dollars against the economy. And so to put some numbers to that, the US now ranks last of the 15 nations with the highest GDP when you're looking at women's workforce participation. So basically, how many of the women are actively working in the workforce. The US is last. In addition, in the US, there's been some recent work done, and where I read it was through an awesome researcher at the Christensen Institute. But basically, when you think about an elementary school schedule, right, 8 to 2, 9 to 3, somewhere in between, the conflict between that schedule and the traditional 9-to-5 workplace costs the economy around $55 billion per year. And you can look at how that was calculated if you're interested. And then on a more micro level, anytime an organization has to replace an employee, they're spending anywhere from half to 2 times at least that person's annual salary in lost productivity, the advertisement costs, the cost of the people who are required to recruit and screen, et cetera, and then all of the onboarding and time that it spends to have that person trained and ramped up, right? And then when you get much more micro and you're talking about the individual mother or employee, the toll is much more personal. There's a toll on each of us, on the family, et cetera. Study after study is finding this. There is so much research and talk about this right now. So I'm probably repeating things that you've read possibly, but a Bright Horizons study a couple of years ago found that the majority, 72% of the moms, say that they were working and they were managing the household and parenting duties, and that was directly leading to higher burnout. Then in a Listen to Your Mother study that we did in 2023, 92% of our respondents of working moms who responded, said that they had to make a change to their career after becoming a mom. So maybe they took a demotion, they decided to go from full-time to part-time, they turned down a promotion, you name it. There were lots of different changes there, but that's nearly everybody who responded. And then, as we know, there was a very recent Surgeon General advisory put out saying that working parents and caregivers, our mental health and our well-being is at stake. And there were some really concrete changes in there, which are all changes, excitingly, that we help organizations make at Listen to Your Mothers. So you can go on to the next slide. So I think the good news is that we actually do know, to Allison's point earlier, what changes are needed. And there are a lot of organizations and people and effort being put in on the individual level, as well as really around systems, law changes, advocacy, even though it feels like that is going very slowly, at least from my perspective, right? That's how it looks. There are changes that can be made, and our emphasis at Listen to Your Mothers and our areas of expertise lend themselves to this middle place, which is where you can make structural and cultural changes, which is at work. So we work with employers to make the changes. We kind of have like buckets of areas. Today we'll be talking about compensation and benefit practices. But we also look at Listen to Your Mothers, we look at childcare benefits, which is a piece of that. We look at change management and training for managers. We look at org culture and more. So today we'll focus on that area of benefits and pay. And then just to give a little bit of context, the next slide has the different areas of expertise that or the different services that we provide. And I'll just mention, because it's not on here, but there's 4 of us working moms who founded, and we all co-lead Listen to Your Mothers. And so with all of us together, we're using all of our expertise in the areas of change management, equity, community activism. I have to look at my notes. School funding, assessment and evaluation, HR, people operations, to name a few.
Great. So obviously, Edgility and Listen to Your Mothers have these 2 very resonant missions and values. And actually, when I talked to Katrina initially on a personal level, the mission just resonated so much for me. And Katrina, I don't even know if I shared this with you, but my co-founding partner, Christina Greenberg, and I were part of that 92%. I mean, we both left the workforce, the traditional path, like executive level roles in the nonprofit space, trying to kind of figure out how to make it work as we were starting families, and ended up doing independent consulting for a time and then connecting up to start Edgility. So we ended up starting an organization, which, has been a great opportunity for us. But, there just didn't seem to be space, to your point, to kind of like stay the path. It would have required a demotion or something that just wasn't interesting to us. And so there's so much alignment between the mission of our organizations, but also personally as leaders. We're really inspired by that work. So we've decided to engage in a strategic partnership with Listen to Your Mothers and try to help each of us can then help serve our clients in a more holistic way. And so I wanted to share a little bit what that looks like and how we tend to approach supporting clients as they're thinking about total rewards and thinking about how to kind of like weave together a really compelling value proposition for working moms. And for both of us, it starts with engaging with people and doing a discovery process inside the organization. So doing surveys and focus groups and really learning about what an organization's bright spots are, where are their challenges, where are their blind spots that they may not even be aware of, where are staff just unclear and confused. So that really helps us understand the state of the state. And then when we go out into the marketplace to do some comparative benchmarking to look at what peer organizations are offering, we have that context. And so that allows us to really weave that together to identify opportunities for improvement that would really resonate with staff and help to build up the value proposition the staff in the organization desire. And then, of course, armed with all of that knowledge, we're able to build out a total rewards program that encompasses the breadth of compensation as well as benefits, thinking about that in a really holistic way, and test that with staff. We sort of have these design sessions where we'll come back and preview some emerging recommendations and get feedback, very similar to kind of a human-centered design process, if you're familiar with that, to really make sure we're able to customize these recommendations in a way that's going to work very well. And then again, supporting all the way through implementation. I mean, as Katrina shared, there's a lot of change management involved in anything you're going to change internally about pay, benefits, promotions. All of that is very sensitive, right? And so we do a lot of work with clients to help them do that implementation process in a really high quality way, especially given everything we've learned about them in the process. So between the two of us, I don't even know if I could estimate how many different organizations we've worked with, but hundreds or thousands, let's put it that way, probably thousands. And so what we wanted to do today was really share what we're seeing with our clients on the unique challenges those organizations are facing and how we're working with them to develop unique solutions to those challenges. The world is changing so quickly right now that a lot of times we're having to design things that are new that, to Katrina's point, the laws haven't caught up with, right? I joke, my example of this is we've been talking about pay transparency at Edgility for a decade. And now all of a sudden there's all these pay transparency laws, right? So oftentimes we're kind of on the cutting edge of helping our clients be doing what they need to do for their people before the formal kind of regulations catch up. So we have some unique solutions that we can preview to you. And of course, always helpful, we'll share some case studies and examples of that and then take some time for Q&A.
All right, we're going to do a poll. Oh, there it is. So we have 2 questions. It was hard for us to narrow them down, but so that's why you see 2 instead of 1. So we would love to know quick answers. You can answer both at the same time and then we'll preview the results. So we would love to know if you're inside an organization, when was the last time that you surveyed your staff on benefits? If you're in more of a consulting role, you could pick one of your, let's just pick one of your current clients that you think you can answer this question about. So when was the last time you surveyed your staff about benefits specifically? Was it within this past year, 2024? Was it 1 or 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, or never to your knowledge? And somewhat related, how important do you think benefits are when your org is trying to attract potential employees, job candidates? Not important, neutral, very important.
I guess it would stand to reason that the folks joining us today would prioritize benefits, right? We're
Right.
seeing lots of very important in terms of how people feel like benefits can play a role in attracting staff.
So Joanna, I can see the poll questions. I don't see responses coming in, just so you know.
I can speak a little bit to the responses because I can see them, but
Okay.
luckily everyone signed up for the right webinar. I guess it would have been awkward if everybody had said they didn't think benefits were important, but it, over 83 people, 83% are saying, benefits are extremely important. A couple folks feeling neutral. And then in terms of the last time
Now I can see it.
organizations surveyed, it's kind of an interesting distribution there.
That is really interesting, actually. I feel good about this, I think, Allison, because honestly, I expected the never to be higher than a third.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can everyone see the results, Joanna? How does this work right now? Okay, awesome. So you can all see what we're speaking to. And I'm super curious, just then we'll move on. So there's 27, there's almost half of you who have surveyed your staff on benefits in the past 2 years. Do you also know what your utilization data is for these benefits, or are you making strategic decisions based on the, staff satisfaction with the benefit? Like, you can just put your answer into chat. Because and I'll just say again, I think that it's really important to use both that utilization data of the benefits as well as that satisfaction, and also the knowledge Allison said earlier about employees actually knowing what's available to them and understanding it. So that's kind of the third prong to that. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So I'll keep moving so we can get to like the solutions and the fun stuff. So I'm not going to speak on this long. I gave some stats earlier. You probably are familiar if you're attending this webinar, but essentially we have a lot of challenges in front of us in terms of turnover, voluntary turnover. And I will name this because I was rereading a report yesterday, and that this kind of session or turnover wave that had many names during the pandemic actually started before the pandemic. So there was actually a trend going, I don't have the stat in front of me, but for years leading up to the pandemic of women dropping out of the workforce. Then right now we're having return from remote mandate or return to office mandates from a lot of, the big name ones are making it to the news even, but it's all different organizations, businesses of all sizes and industries, as far as I can tell. Moms, and not just moms, but other folks who have different identities, often identities that are in the minority in their workplace, but can be anybody, are overworked and overwhelmed and burned out. So especially the caregivers is what we think about at Listen to Your Mothers. But that's, strategic, and we know that the changes that we're going to talk about impact all of the folks there. And then childcare costs and reliability is not where it should be or could be. So we will talk about solutions going back and forth between me and Allison, between Listen to Your Mothers and sharing some case studies, and Edgility sharing some as well to talk about solutions. Oh, yeah, this is me too. So I think I was just starting to speak to this. So perfect. I forgot that the natural segue was actually what I wanted. So one of our values at Listen to Your Mothers is called targeted universalism. I'm not going to go into what exactly targeted universalism means and the different where it came from and all of that right now, but it's basically, you can look it up, but it's basically the belief that when we make a change for working moms to thrive within an organization, within a workplace, that's actually a more universal need and in benefits all of the workers, all of the employees in that one particular organization. That is that was our first value when we were designing the values for Listen to Your Mothers. And it comes up in so many of our planning sessions continuously over and over again. So, and there's, other reasons, besides the fact that it's a value of ours, you can see the reasons here on the slide that when we're designing benefits for moms, we're really making them benefit all of us and all of our employees.
Yeah, I mean, so we really center when we're thinking about kind of how do we help organizations live out their values. We're working with nonprofits that are really committed to equity. Like, how do we center that in our process? And for us, there are kind of three core pillars. And the first is clarity and transparency. And really that we just believe that knowledge is power. If you don't know about a benefit, how can you utilize it, right? If it's not transparent, then it becomes really ad hoc as to who gets access to it, whose manager happens to support it versus not, right? And so being really clear and transparent about your programs and then making it super accessible to everyone is kind of the sort of baseline step. And then, in addition to that, fairness and consistency. So this is our second pillar, because you can have really equitable and inclusive, policies, but if you're making all these special exceptions for certain people and only giving other, certain folks access to them, then you're not being fair or consistent in how they're being implemented, right? And then the third thing is, and I alluded this to a little bit as we were talking about our process, but designing with inclusion and belonging in mind. And so really engaging staff from a variety of backgrounds to make sure that you are, designing all of these programs with everyone in mind, not just kind of the dominant demographic group in your organization, and that you're designing programs that are going to help everyone feel like they belong in your organization. And so one of the ways that we do this at the beginning of an engagement is by surveying the entire team. And when what we're looking for is gaps. So a lot of times what we'll find is that, overall, when you average it out, people feel pretty good about the growth opportunities in the organization. But when you look at it across gender identity groups, there's huge differences, right? Or if you look at it across racial lines of identity, you can find these big gaps. Not always the case, but that happens a lot. And so really what we encourage organizations to do is to survey your staff on all of the different aspects of your total value proposition. Yes, look for bright spots and look for areas where you could be better, but more importantly, look at how each of those areas are working for different, demographics in your organization. And we look at the entire value proposition because, as I mentioned earlier, every single piece of your talent program is so interwoven with the rest. If you pull on one thread without thinking about everything else, you can actually unweave something that's working really well or make a knot even worse, right? For lack of a better metaphor. And so when we're looking at any sort of change to your human capital programming, we're going to look at how effective are you at attracting your staff into the organization. How, once they get there, are you engaging them and supporting them in the right ways? Are you growing them over time and giving them opportunities to develop as professionals? Are they getting regular feedback and being really clear on what the expectations are and how to get to the next level and what success looks like? And then, of course, are they being compensated effectively for that and rewarded for their work? Are they recognized? Do they have a fair salary? Is it competitive? And also, of course, is your benefits program working for your people? So when you put this all together, you get a total value proposition. And the dirty little secret is that most organizations cannot afford to be the most competitive in each of these different areas. That's not going to be possible for anyone. But what you can commit to is being really fair and designing things with inclusion in mind that works for your employees. And it doesn't have to look exactly like what other organizations are doing. So when we're kind of thinking about solutions, we're trying to take a really balanced approach. So yes, we want to think about external competitiveness. We also want to think about the financial sustainability of any initiative that we are developing with the client, and of course look at the internal equity implications of those programs. We also want to think about other factors inside your organization. What is your strategy? Are you growing? Are you evolving or changing in any way? Is there anything unique about your organizational values that needs to be kind of embedded into this as well? What type of culture are you trying to build? If you design programs with those 4 things in mind, they will work for your organization. If not, they will work against your organization.
All right, so I have one particular case study, and I think it's worth noting here, if I didn't say it earlier explicitly, that when I think about benefits and when Listen to Your Mothers talks about benefits, I'm often trying to say benefits and policies, because benefits for some of us mean, medical, dental, life insurance, disability insurance, employee assistance program. But for us, it's much larger umbrella, because as Allison has reminded us, it's all related. So for us, the umbrella of benefits includes your time off programs, it includes your leaves, it includes all of your policies and practices about where and when people work. So I have one case study here that's from one of my clients, a former client that's probably a couple years old. I should have looked up the year of when we started working on this, but obviously it was as that COVID vaccines had been fully rolled out. Maybe that's not obvious. They had been fully rolled out. And basically, this organization they are a small direct service organization, all within New York City. And all of their employees live within. And they essentially, in a nutshell, they provide mediation, conflict resolution, restorative justice services through the court system in New York, but also through private referrals and also within workplaces. But the bulk of what they do is through a couple of the courts in New York. So the leadership was feeling they were coming to me because they had been fully remote. They had moved all of their services to be fully remote. They quickly adapted all of their practices to be able to work with their clients over Zoom. And at this point that they came to me, they were feeling, the leadership team especially was feeling a lot of pressure, because there are very equivalent organizations, peer organizations within New York State. Obviously, New York State's huge. They were the service provider in New York City, but all of their kind of peers in other parts of the state had all gone back to serving in person in the courts. And so there was a lot of pressure, both from peer organizations and then as well as funders, as well as key partners of theirs, being those in the courts who were returning to in-person work. So I worked with their leadership team to create a strategy, draft a policy, and then to help them with change management, essentially. So the purposes that you see here, the 3 purposes that you see here, they didn't exist when I first started. So during that assessment phase, collected information from across the organization, all employees. And then first thing I facilitated was their leadership team coming together to define why they were doing this, why they were creating this policy. It wasn't just you know, to get back in the office, right? It was like, why, what were they doing? What were the values and the purposes behind it? And then we wrote the policy, and I won't go into depth now, but you can see some of the values that we stuck to. You can see some of the actual nuts and bolts of the policies under key expectations. So we didn't change the amount of time folks were working, but it was about changing the where folks were working. And I think it's important, you know, I'll have a lot of strategies around change management communication, but one of the big ones is to communicate what's not changing as well as what is changing. And what you see here is minimum of 1 day per week, being in person, and prioritizing team meetings every month in person with a little asterisk. And that's because they actually ramped up to 1 day per week in person. So it was the same exact policy that we rolled out. The first year, though, was like a suggestion of 1 day in person or 1 day every 2 weeks at a bare minimum. And then by the first year or so of this policy being in place, they increased that to the standard of what it is, of what they hope it will be long-term, which is 1 day per week in person. And there was a lot to consider. Like a lot of direct service organizations, they have folks who are not serving clients. And so we did a lot of conversation around, like, what does this mean for folks who are maybe in a fundraising role or an operations role versus direct service, and helped with all of that. So I think that's it. I'm happy when we get to the Q&A to answer questions on this one.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that we hear a lot when we're doing discovering with clients is, you know, burnout, and just people feeling overwhelmed, feeling like they can't take leave because if there's almost like there's a penalty for doing it, you come back to, you know, even more work than when you left. And so, you know, we'll often look at an organization and say, wow, you have this really generous paid time off policy. But to Katrina's point, you have to look at utilization, because when you actually talk to staff, what you hear is nobody actually uses all of their time because they can't. And so we've worked with organizations to put in place some solutions for that. What are some things you can do to help kind of, you know, make sure people have, you know, supports in place to be able to use that time? Obviously, you know, the first one you would only do for a longer and extended leave. But, you know, if you have somebody who's going out of office for 3, 4 or 5 months, instead of kind of dividing that work up and sort of shuffling it off on lots of different people's plates, thinking about the idea of hiring a temp, you know, to fill that gap for a couple of months, and making sure that that person's coming when they come back into the office. It's not like they have, you know, 5 months of buildup that they're coming back to. We have organizations that also promote what job sharing functionality. So they'll have 2 or 3 people cross train on key aspects of each of their roles, and then cover for each other when they're out of the office, just for those key aspects, so that those kind of core functions continue moving forward. We have things, return to work sprints, which essentially is, you know, instead of kind of coming back all at once, you know, going from being fully out of the office to being back full time, gradually easing back in. And maybe you come back for the first couple of weeks, 10 hours a week, and then you ramp up to 20 hours a week. And then over the course of a month, you go from, you know, being on leave to being fully back in the office. I think that's been something that is really helpful to people. It's hard to go from 0 to 60, particularly when you're dealing with, you know, like a major life change, right, at the same time. And then also just kind of thinking about ways to leverage technology, you know, while folks are out of the office, so that some of the things they're responsible for can keep moving. And that's, you know, looked like automating workflows for emails or tasks or project updates, so that they don't come back to a full inbox or a long checklist. You can even delegate mailboxes and things like that, so that other folks can kind of take over some of those pieces on their own, you know, while they're out.
So here's a case study related to being out, and related to paid time off programs. So I think the couple, probably the two biggest, if I had to stop and think about it, kind of problem areas that clients talk to me about when it comes to paid time off are what Allison said, where folks don't feel like they can use their time off. And then the flip side of what I see is that the paid time off programs that they have in place are not working for all employees. So maybe they're not working so what I likely encounter, right, is that they're only thinking about regular full-time employees is what that means. And so this is an example, and I'll say there's a lot of solutions. This is to that kind of problem. I've done, you know, the comprehensive go through your entire employee handbook and kind of look at those, call out those areas for opportunity where you're only focused on regular full-time employees. And that means that it may be confusing, it may be at best, it may be, you know, inequitable, it may not be welcoming to other types of employees. And I've also created one-off benefit programs or policies. So this is an example of one. Paid sick time. Essentially, this was an organization that utilizes a pretty, I know there's a lot of controversy, but a pretty successful, I'll say, flex PTO policy. So regular full-time employees have flex PTO, but all of the temporary and part-time employees didn't have any way to get paid for sick time. And so the first thing that I did, and this organization was around 350 probably employees throughout the US at the time. So the first thing I did was to research all of the states that had paid sick leave mandates, and I did that in order to build a case to the executive team. So the client, that was the kind of the first part of my scope of work, was actually getting the okay from the executives for this new paid time off. So we did that by drawing on the laws that already existed. You can't always do that, but in this case we did. And then we created as simple as a paid sick time off policy as we could, essentially one that would be comprehensive of all of those various dozen more state policies, which is how we came up with the 6 days. Obviously leaving in the language of, you know, or as much as your law requires, and just made it as simple as possible and made this applicable to everybody who was not eligible for flex PTO. And we drew on resources and systems that they already had in place to actually be able to put it into action.
Yeah, and I think again, I would just kind of emphasize the importance of making sure that, you know, everything's shared, you know, and that people understand what's available to them so that they can take advantage of it. And I think the other thing that you'll find when you do that really well is it's going to make you as an organization more credible in the eyes of your employees, because if they know kind of what the rules of operating are, then they can trust that if you understand those too, and you're going to be more consistent in applying them. And so I think that it builds trust, it builds credibility, in addition to kind of all the other, you know, advantages that we've talked about.
So one last case study, and this is merely to show an example of the fact that you don't have to think necessarily forever or permanent or long-term when you put benefits into place. Sometimes, and oftentimes, I see this because organizations are moving into new jurisdictions, into new states, they're expanding. They need to have certain policies in place for a temporary period of time, right? In this case, it's pretty unique. It was an organization that we were working with where they felt like the values of their organization was, you know, in conflict with law changes that were happening in the country. So essentially in response to both Roe v. Wade being overturned, as well as the very complex and ever-changing landscape around healthcare for transgender people, this organization wanted to do something to support their employees for the short period of time between that point in time and when they were able to review their benefits, essentially open enrollment. So it was a short period of time. They literally put their money where their mouth is, which I think is amazing. You don't always see this, to Allison's point as to why they founded Edgility. And so this is a quick snapshot of this expanded healthcare benefit reimbursement that we put into place to cover essentially any type of medical expense, including travel, that was incurred during that period of time. Yeah, I think that it's really, it is strategic to think long-term. And I'm often talking to clients about having, how are you gonna sustain this benefit? That's the norm, I would say. But every once in a while, it is strategic to think, kind of short-term patchwork type of, to Allison's point earlier, if it's staffing, if it's a benefit that's needed in the short term, there are many different things to support employees. And oftentimes they are ready to tell us, and it's more about, asking them and looking at the data and going from there.
Yeah. So this is where we move to Q&A, and I don't think we have anything in the chat quite yet, but if people have questions, we're happy to field those. If there's anything specific to your organization that you're struggling with, or clarifications on things we've talked about so far, this is your chance. You can drop them right into the chat.
I did see one question. It might have been just to me. But in terms of surveying your staff for benefits, how often should you do that? We had that question at the beginning of how often had they done it. When was the most recent time they did it? So they're looking for best practices here.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on your organization's size and whether you're growing or not. Because I like to see a benefit satisfaction survey and then utilization data at least as often as you're going to market with your healthcare, the big, main healthcare benefit, right? So if you're kind of in a status quo in terms of number of employees, geographic spread of your employees, and your benefits, your medical benefits are working for the majority, and you're not going to go to market and you're going to renew with the same plan, then maybe you don't need to do benefits surveying that particular year. But I think that skipping more than 1 year is not a good use of resources, because yes, there are resources that you need to spend to do the work of surveying, but it's more likely that you're spending resources on benefits that folks don't know about or are not enrolled in or aren't using.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially just given how, benefits are expensive, right? So why not really make sure that you're getting the most out of them and, getting that return on investment for your people. I fully agree that a year is kind of the table stakes.
And something else that makes me think of is satisfaction and engagement surveys are traditionally and best practices to do them every year. And I think a good way to make them shorter and more user-friendly is to move any question that's related to benefits, like big umbrella benefits, policies, where you work, when you work, time off, leaves, like take those out of your satisfaction and engagement survey if you have them in there right now, and move them to a more all-encompassing benefits survey.
Yeah. And on that note, so that our talent equity assessment looks at satisfaction as a component, and that's something we recommend doing once a year with a temperature check. Just a couple questions, just a couple headline questions, things like net promoter score and things like that on a slightly more regular basis, just to see how, just to be able to course correct in smaller increments of time if things start to shift and change. You don't want to wait a whole year to find that out. So I can't agree more that you want to sort of be looking at that broader picture as well. So I see another question.
Allison, there's a question.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, hello. So this is an organization that recently collaborated with us, and and it looks like it looked at our compensation worksheets. So essentially, the way we approach that is essentially through a partnership. So Edgility can look at, salary, compensation practices and things like that in an engagement, and then Listen to Your Mothers will look at the benefits package, and we'll collaborate together to kind of look at total rewards. And we are, Katrina is mentioning to me, we are also going to be sharing some resources with everyone on the heels of this. Probably tomorrow an email will go out with some additional resources.
Yeah, and if you have a particular benefits, I mean, I know you say benefits package, total comp package, which is awesome. I'm so happy to hear that you're doing the whole thing. If there's a particular, very specific benefit or leave program that you have a question about, feel free to email us too, because our contact info is in the presentation too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a lot of materials on our website too, so we'll send things out. But if there's any follow-up questions, I know, Katrina, I don't know about you, but we're always happy to take follow-up questions and even meet one-on-one.
Yep, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
I'm going to put in the contact information for both Katrina and Allison in the chat. Feel free to copy that. I also have a survey up if you don't mind taking the survey, just letting us know how you enjoyed your time. And if we have a few more minutes for any last questions. But I would just like to thank Allison and Katrina for their time this afternoon and for being with us and sharing their insights into this very important topic.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.